Module Overview. This foundational module introduces you to the conceptual, mathematical, psychological, and historical underpinnings of perspective in visual art. It investigates the evolution of perspective as both a scientific method and a philosophical framework, exploring how artists from ancient civilizations to the Renaissance and beyond have attempted to depict three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional surface. Perspective is not merely a tool, it is a visual language of space, a bridge between observed reality and imagined worlds. This module builds the groundwork for understanding vanishing points, horizon lines, eye level, picture planes, and orthogonal constructions. The core goal is to instill a deep theoretical and practical grasp of how space can be constructed, manipulated, and interpreted in artistic practice. Learning objectives. By the end of this module, you will be able to define and describe the basic terminology of linear perspective. Trace the historical origins and philosophical implications of spatial representation. Analyze how visual space was handled in different art traditions: Egyptian, Byzantine, Chinese, Western classical. Understand the mathematical principles underlying perspective construction. Accurately identify the horizon line, vanishing points, and eye level in real-world observation and classical artworks. Construct basic perspective grids manually or digitally. Differentiate between intuitive, empirical, and geometric perspectives. Historical foundations of perspective. Perspective in art has not always been a given. Early civilizations, such as the Egyptians, used hierarchical scaling figures were drawn not according to spatial logic, but by social status. In contrast, Greek and Roman artists began experimenting with more naturalistic representations of space, using overlapping and foreshortening. However, it was not until the Renaissance that formal linear perspective emerged as a codified system. Figures like Filippo Brunelleschi and Leon Battista Alberti formulated mathematical approaches that transformed painting into a scientifically grounded endeavor. Their techniques introduced a new way to structure narrative, realism, and theological symbolism. Key figures to know: Brunelleschi, pioneer of vanishing point usage; Alberti, author of On Painting, the first treatise on perspective; Leonardo da Vinci, developed aerial atmospheric perspective; Masaccio, applied one-point perspective masterfully in fresco; Albrecht Dürer, German master of perspective instruments and theory. Key concepts and definitions. A. Picture plane. An imaginary, transparent surface that sits between the viewer and the subject. It's the window through which we see the composition. B. Horizon line. A horizontal line representing the viewer's eye level, crucial in establishing the viewer's relationship to the subject. It defines where the sky meets the land or sea in nature. C. Vanishing point S, on the horizon line where all parallel lines converge. These are essential for creating depth. Orthogonals, receding lines that appear to converge at the vanishing point. They help organize architecture and space realistically. E. Transversals. Horizontal lines perpendicular to orthogonals, used to indicate equal spacing and depth. Types of perspective introduced in this module: linear perspective with 1, 2, or 3 vanishing points; foreshortening, visual compression of objects receding in space; empirical perspective, intuitive space-making without formal tools; isometric perspective, used in Asian art, technical drawing, games. We introduce a one-point perspective here as the easiest to visualize, commonly seen in railroad tracks or hallway illustrations, but students also explore multi-point systems conceptually, preparing them for later modules. Spatial psychology and human perception. This module also touches on how human vision interprets space, binocular vision and depth perception, the phenomenon of optical illusions in art, cognitive biases in spatial estimation. Understanding how our brains see space helps artists manipulate perspective convincingly and intentionally, especially in surreal, conceptual, or non-objective art. Global and cultural interpretations of perspective. Chinese landscape scrolls use multiple viewpoints and floating perspectives, allowing the eye to journey through time and space. Islamic art, due to aniconism, used geometric tessellations and infinite patterns to represent divine order. African sculpture often embodies symbolic perspective, privileging spiritual importance over optical realism. These diverse models challenge the Western dominance of single-point realism and open doors to cross-cultural creative thinking. Practical studio assignments. Draw a city street using one-point perspective. Identify vanishing points in photographs and famous artworks. Sketch your room from a seated perspective with correct horizon line. Build a perspective grid using a ruler or software. Recreate a Renaissance painting's perspective structure. Recommended readings for Module 1. Perspective Made Easy by Ernest Norling. Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards. The Painter's Secret Geometry by Charles Boulot. Linear Perspective for Artists by Rex Vicat Cole.